Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about Monasterium, which is a 2020 release board game by Arve Fuhler and published by DLP Games. This one takes about 90 minutes to play and accommodates 2 to 4 players, so there is no solo mode for this one. I must admit I've never played any game by Arve Fuhler before, and this is my first one, but this one is a dice drafting game, which is one of my favourite mechanisms, and it plays out over this rather nice looking board here. Made up of this kind of central track here where you have your own little player piece here, your wagon. I've only set up for one player, but everybody would have their own piece. And you've got these 5 different churches here. And something I should say as well is that this board is double-sided, so this is the 2-player count, and the other side, the churches are a little bit more intricate with more spaces in them, because these churches are actually broken down into different sections. So you've got the chapel area here, you've got the central area which is called the cloister, and you've got these outside buildings here, which are, well, basically called the buildings. And we're going to get points in lots of different ways in this game, for such as having the majorities in each of the churches. So if you have the number of your worshippers in the churches more than anybody else, you're going to get 5 points for each one of those. You're also going to get points based on how many of these chapels you're in at the end of the game. And there are also a number of public objectives here, which you're going to try and succeed throughout the game. So for example, these 2 here, basically if you have somebody in this particular church, and you have someone in the chapel, the cloister, and 2 people in the cloisters and 1 person in the chapel, then you're going to get a number of points based on the round you get it done on. So if you get it done earlier, then you're going to get more points than if you get it done later, because as you can see from this card here, the game is broken into 3 rounds, and so the earlier you get it done, the more points you're going to get. So these 2 work exactly the same, but with different churches. And then these objectives are a bit more different. So you want someone in the chapel of this church, in the cloister of this church. You want someone in the buildings of this church, in the buildings of this church. This one here again, you want someone in the buildings of this church, the buildings of this church, and the chapel of this church. And all based on that time restriction of trying to get it done as quickly as you can. There are also a couple of other objectives as well, where if you get them done by the end of the game, you're going to get rewarded a number of points. So this one, if you unlock all of your own dice, you get 8 points. And this one here, if you get 3 people down, in the book rooms, you get an additional 8 points. Now, the game, as I said, is a dice drafting game, and it's going to play quite interestingly and quite differently than any other dice drafter that I've played, because you're going to have a number of dice based on the player count. So, for example, in a 2-player game, you're going to have 5 dice and 1 of your own player colour, and you're going to roll them, and then you're going to basically choose one of the pip values. So, for example, if I picked a 3 here, I'll pick all the 3s up, and I'll put them onto the 3 action slots. And then we're going to take turns with the other players until you've allocated all your dice onto these spots here. So let's just say I've done this. Sorry, that'll be on the 4. And these are rolled. Let's put them on here like this. 3 there. And then starting from the first player, they are going to draft from one of these action slots, taking turn by turn. And basically all these action slots can be taken, or 3 dice can be taken at a time, which dictates how many actions you can take. So if someone took the 3, for example, they'll take 3 die, and then they could take the corresponding action based on that. Your own player die cannot be taken by other players, so that's kind of a protected one. And additionally, the 6s represent any of the other actions, but you can only ever take 1 at a time. So let's have a look at what the actual actions do. So you actually get a unique, your own player board here, and as you can see, you've got all the different dice values here. So you've got a 5 here, which lets you move your wagon down the track. You've got a 4 that gets you rosary beads. You've got the 3 that gets you these influence tokens. You've got a 2 that gives you the food. And you've got a 1, which is, I suppose, one of the main actions, which is going to let you deploy your new worshippers in the churches. So for every time you take this action, you're going to choose one of these corresponding rows here, which shows the resources you need to spend in order to deploy them. So for example, this first row here, you need to spend 2 matching tokens. So you've got the 3 different tokens here. You've got food, you've got tools, and you've got books, like so. And if you spend them, basically 2 of those and a picture frame as well, which are these influence tokens, then you can deploy someone on one of the matching buildings, as you can see. So for example, if I did that one by paying 2 food tokens and an influence token, I could place my man here in one of those matching suit buildings, like so, on any building that my current wagon is touching. So for example, this one wagon is touching this building and this building, because you can trace the paths to that building. So if, for example, if I was here, then I could reach this building and this building, and so on. And whenever you deploy one of these people in the buildings, you get a number of points and a reward as well. So you've got this track here where you say, if you deploy someone in the food building, you can get a tools token and a point. If you deploy someone in the tools building, you get a book and 2 points. If you deploy someone in the book buildings, you get 3 points, and you also get one of these stained glass window tokens. And those stained glass window tokens are important because, as you can see, every church has their own unique one. So this one here, for example, has this one here. And if you if you take that action, you can end up putting these tokens on your own player board in this section here, like so. Starting from the left and building to the right, but using any row you want to. And when you place it, you can either take any of the reward corresponding to the horizontal or vertical axes. So for example, I could take an influence token or a food token. And as you go on and you build more of these as well, you can get to the end here and unlock more points, and unlock more points if you get a whole column as well. But there are some restrictions where you cannot have duplicates on any row or column. So you've got to be a bit more spatially aware there. But as you can see, there's quite a high potential of getting more points here. And obviously, as the game goes on, you're going to unlock more and more of these spots, either choosing the more expensive row here where you have to spend in 3 tokens, or deploying people into the chapels. And the chapels are important because you actually spend influence tokens instead. So for the first one, you spend 1 influence token, the second one you spend 2, the third one you spend 3. But then you can start putting your people in the corresponding chapel, so like this. And as the game goes on, these spots are going to get more and more restrictive because each chapel can only store a certain amount of people. So for example, that one can only store 4 people. But having people in chapels is good because when you have people in chapels, you can unlock this slot here, which means that you can start taking these stained glass window tiles as the basic action. So you can really fill up your board quicker and quicker. Additionally, when you start deploying people in the cloisters, which you have even more restrictions to because you need to have someone either parked outside it with your wagon, or you need to have someone in the corresponding chapel. But you can also start deploying them in the cloister, which means you can put these down, which obviously are important because they get you points for different objectives. But they also let you flip the tile here, like so, meaning that whenever I take a 1 dice from now on, I end up getting a point for each one that I use. So as the game goes on, your options get wider and wider, and you can end up taking loads of really cool actions based on what you've unlocked. And something I should say is that these ones here, you can only do them once per turn, but still they're a lot more powerful. So you could do things such as taking 2 rewards, or moving your wagon twice as fast, or even getting pure points. And as you're travelling around the board, obviously you're getting access to these other churches, but you're unlocking bonuses as well. So that one lets you take a bonus action, that one lets you get a bonus resource, that one lets you upgrade one of your tokens, that one gets you a free stained glass window, and this one lets you unlock more dice. So as you can see, you start with one basic die of your colour, which means nobody else can take it, but you've got the potential for unlocking more pieces of your own, which obviously gets you more actions and stops other people from stealing them. And the game is going to go on until the 3 rounds are over, and then points are going to be divvied up depending on the objectives, on the majorities of the castles, and on how many chapels you are in. So that's going to be how the game's going to work. So there are lots of things I really like about this game, and number one being the dice drafting mechanism here, because I really like the way that you build these pools up based on dice that you roll yourself. So normally you just roll a big bunch of dice and just allocate them automatically, but in this one you actually select which pool you want to add that to. And that adds quite an interesting decision because you've got to be really careful about what you leave your opponent to take while still being wary that you actually want to take particular actions yourself. So you don't just want to keep allocating maybe 3 dice to each pool if your opponent's going first, because they can just take all those dice and leave you with next to nothing. At the same time, you've got to be really careful about what you leave or allocate your personal dice to, because that one cannot be stolen. But at the same time, you've got to be careful that you're allocating it to the right place, because you might not actually roll what you want to roll. So I really do like that back and forth of keeping your options open, but still not playing into your opponent's hand. So the dice drafting mechanism is something that I really like. I also really like the options of the different strategies you can go down, because this game is actually very tight on time. You've only got 3 distinct rounds, and they do fly by pretty damn quickly. And before long, you'll find yourself just completely concentrating on one of the churches in trying to maybe fulfill one of these objectives, and a whole round's gone and you've still got the other 4 churches to worry about. So it has a really nice sense of pacing where, you know, it gives you a nice time restriction. I don't think you can really get everything done. So you've got to have to kind of tunnel vision yourself somewhat on whether you're going to go for these objectives, whether you can try and maybe match a couple up and try to get a bit more out of your turns that way, whether you're going to go for these additional objectives, whether you're going to, you know, play it nice and slowly and focus on one church at a time, or whether you're going to try and speed down the track and unlock those quicker bonuses to unlock more dice and also unlock more points. So again, you've got lots of choices to make. You know, you can really focus on your player board here in order to get these rows down and potentially unlock extra workers to deploy, or even focus on your own stained glass window here, which, as you can see, you can get a lot of points potential here by unlocking these rows and columns. So there are lots of interesting decisions to go down in terms of strategies, meaning, you know, and the dice allocation and things like that, and also your resource management, because, you know, getting people in these buildings is necessary if you want to get into the cloisters, but at the same time you want to get into the chapels, because you get those set collections for getting all the chapels, but you also get the ability to unlock these stained glass window tiles. So there are a lot of choices to make, which is absolutely great. The balance of the game as well is really good. I mean, I see all these different ways of scoring points as a reasonable way to try and go throughout the game. And, you know, mechanically the game actually flows really well also, because, you know, you start off by doing very basic primitive actions and obviously going through this kind of dice placement mechanism. But by the end of the game, you are doing so many different things based on your player board here that it does have a real nice ramping up effect. So yeah, I really do like that. The time investment, as I said, works really well. I mean, I think in a 2-player game, you can get this down to well under, say, 90 minutes. You can probably get this done at around the 70-minute mark. So any kind of point in that game, it doesn't feel like it drags on. It's nice and snappy, nice and quick, because you just, as I said, you're just selecting one of these dice pools and allocating them as such. I also like the use of the wild dice here. So, as I said, you are restricted by taking 1 dice at a time, but it gives you the flexibility to do what you want to do. So allocating to 6s is quite good in that respect, but you're only taking 1 action at a time. Whereas if you, say, have a more specific strategy, you can take 3 at a time, but as I said, you're limiting yourself by doing so. The uptime is really good. As I said, the turns are snappy. There's not really much scope for losing interest. And the aesthetic of the game as well, I think it has a nice kind of throwback Euro feel to it, where it has a nice bright and vibrant look, but it still has a classical element to it. Nice clean iconography. You know, all the goal scoring criteria is nice and clear. The player boards are excellent. They're nice and long, but they show everything you can do nice and clearly. And it's not kind of overwhelming in terms of symbology or anything like that. So I do like the way the game looks and feels. Not overproduced, but certainly not underproduced either. Player interaction is good because you are limited to seats in the chapels, you are limited to seats in the cloister. Only 1 person can go in each building, for example. You want to get these stained glass window tiles, and these are limited based on the number of players, so you know you can't constantly get what you want to get. So yeah, there's lots of a fair amount of player interaction, but I think most of it stems from the dice drafting, where people are going to start selecting dice that you want to use. So prioritising which pool you're going to draft from is very, very important. The theme as well, I think, works absolutely fine. I've got no issues whatsoever. Yes, it's pretty dry, and I suppose what you'd expect from a Euro, but you know, you don't have to kind of fix what isn't broken, and I think it works absolutely fine. Setup and teardown time is no issue. Yes, you've got to deploy maybe more of these workers than you'd normally have to do on your player boards, but still, it doesn't take very long. And progression of the game is absolutely out of this world good, because these player boards do such a great job of opening your options as the game develops. You get loads more things you can do. You know, where you start taking off very basic actions such as taking food, you can end up doing loads and loads and loads, getting points for each dice you've taken, getting your stained glass windows down, getting discounts, getting rosary beads. You know, you're doing loads and loads with your turn as opposed to what you start with, which is great. Scalability works well too, because the churches become tighter based on the player count, and obviously, as I said, these tiles become more limited. The board is double-sided, so there is that as well, and the number of dice allocated to each player is changed depending on the player count. So it's all scaled nicely to get that same tight Euro feel. And comparison-wise, there are loads of dice drafters out there, but that extra element of that almost Yahtzee-style dice rolling works really well and makes this kind of stand slightly apart from all the other ones out there. So overall, I was really impressed by this game. I had a really good time playing it, extremely accessible, but still has lots of interesting decisions throughout, particularly with the upgrades on the player boards and the different strategies you want to go down. And something that really does stick with me is the restriction of the rounds, because as I said, you've only got 3 rounds in this game, and those rounds do fly by really quickly. So I do like that restriction. So yeah, this is a great game, extremely enjoyable, it's very pleasant and breezy to play, but still has lots of interesting decisions throughout. And yeah, I would highly recommend this one. So this one definitely gets my seal of quality. I would recommend you check it out. And I think it's probably going to fly under the radar and maybe, hopefully, maybe pick up a bit of steam going into the new year. So if this does kind of pique your interest, I highly recommend you check it out because it is very, very enjoyable. So that is Monasterium, designed by Arve Fuhler. Check this one out.